It was our last full day of the holiday. Today we had to hand the car back to the rental office in Tulum, but not until late afternoon. So we were going to Coba, getting there bright and early. The archaeological site didn't open until 8 a.m., so we spent a useful 30 minutes up by the lake. Pied-billed grebes were back on the lake and big flocks of orchard orioles were flitting amongst the reeds. Along the rough track at the west side of the lake, a little blue heron was actively feeding, taking no interest in the village waking up around him. There was a great blue heron also feeding in the same rocky pool. A cinnamon hummingbird perched momentarily in a shaft of sunlight. It really didn't want to turn and face us for photos. White-winged doves greeted the day, sitting in the tree that had been so good on previous visits. It was time to head into the archaeological site now. At least this much more famous site was open for business on time. One reason for our visit was that we'd been told that there was a flock of ocellated turkeys currently at the site. We hadn't seen these birds since we'd visited Belize back in 2008. They would be a Mexico tick, if we found them. We hadn't really expected them to be wandering round the car park though. Well, that was a good start. We paid up for our tickets, ignored the extra 50 peso charge for taking videos, really, and headed in. We had last been here in June 2009, when it was hot and a little chaotic. Then the alternatives were to walk the long road to the main ruins or to use one of the bicycle taxis that were everywhere. Now the done thing seemed to be to rent your own bike, although there were still a few bicycle taxis around. We stuck to walking, all the better to see the birds. And the ubiquitous Yucatan squirrels, of course. Because we'd previously visited this site, we weren't too distracted by the ruins themselves. We glanced at any close at hand, like the ball court of the Coba group, but the birds were the main draw. An ivory-billed woodcreeper was one of the first to show, followed by a turquoise-browed motmot. We were aware that other tourists were likely to start turning up at any time, so were keen to move further from the gate. We were quite surprised at how soon the first groups of cyclists and walkers started to appear. It seemed that there were more than just us, keen to get an early start. Unfortunately, they were not birders, so they tended to flush whatever bird we were creeping up on. A particularly annoying flush was a ruddy quail dove that we were just about to photograph. Some birds were more obliging. Squirrel cuckoos had been seen regularly throughout our vacation, but this one was good enough to pose for photos. Another bird found scrabbling in the undergrowth at the edge of the path was a Louisiana water thrush. It was very active and in low light, rendering photography difficult. It was even more difficult when it was flushed by the same people that flushed our ruddy quail dove, this time coming in the opposite direction. One bird we were hoping to come across at this site was thicket tinamou. This would be a lifer, but tinamous are always difficult to see. They are easier to hear, if they are calling, and we were lucky enough to hear some distant calls. A tick then, but a view would have been better. As if to compensate, another arcellated turkey crossed the path and wandered into the undergrowth. At this point it was mid-morning, temperatures were rising, as was the visitor traffic, and the birds were getting quieter. We decided to head back along the trail towards the entrance, ignoring the offers of the bicycle taxi men for a lift back. The group of ruins nearest to the gate is called the Coba group. It is the oldest part of the whole site, dating from the early classic, 300 to 600 CE, and with the second highest pyramid on the site. More to our current interest, it also had a Trogon, a black-headed Trogon, and one that was happy to pose. The second tallest pyramid on the site, some 74 meters tall, is called the church. The Spanish conquistadors obviously thought that there was something ecclesiastical about it. Nearby, in the undergrowth, a small group of red-throated ant tanagers were foraging. Time to leave, fighting against the crowds heading in as the tour buses from the coastal hotels were pitching up in the car park. We went for an early lunch in a cafe at the side of the site and then decided what to do next. A road west of the village, to San Juan del Dejos, was a hotspot on eBird, so we decided to give it a go. Almost immediately, we found this immature grey hawk giving excellent views at the side of the road. We hadn't seen many lizards on this trip, so a yellow-spotted shiny lizard was a nice find. Blue buntings had been quite common, but they had usually stuck to the deep undergrowth and not come out for photos, so this very obliging female was a nice surprise. The ferruginous pygmy owl calls had helped. Pity the very blue males were not as showy. A white-browed gnatcatcher also showed up, but typically hid behind vegetation when cameras were pointed. We had to be back at Chulum by 4:30 p.m. to hand in the car, so we thought it time to head back. A last stop at Coba Lake, and the rough track, added good views of Limpkin. It was odd to think that we'd last seen this species at the back of a garden centre in Liverpool, Nova Scotia, last autumn. It seemed to have enjoyed some Nova Scotian slugs and snails during its few days' stay and seemed quite at home. Nearby a northern jacana also hunted for food. So we drove back to Chulum, pausing only briefly in Macario Gomez when a keel-billed toucan flew over the road and disappeared into a woodlot. Unfortunately only one of us saw it. It was odd, we'd expected to see toucans daily, but this was to be the only one of the trip. Having successfully deposited the car, caught the collectivo back to the hotel and got back to our room, we decided to spend the last hour of daylight on the balcony. A good choice. Our tree was fruiting, so it was very active, starting with rufous-browed peppershrike. Of course great kiskadees were present. More unusually they seemed to be squabbling amongst themselves. It was nice to get a view of the raised yellow crest. Needless to say, our indefatigable hooded warbler was present and very active. Social flycatchers joined the Kiskadis too. And a real treat for the balcony list was a couple of squirrel cuckoos. The video shows how it got its English name, as the bird bounces through the branches like a squirrel. Note the pale eye ring, denoting this bird as the northern subspecies. Birds from South America have red eye rings. Rose-throated bickard and golden-fronted woodpecker came along to join the party. And, of course, hooded orioles were present, as was a surprise turquoise-browed motmot. Altogether it was our best ever balcony watch. A last dinner. Tonight's theme was Canadian, which was a bit of a disappointment. Then some packing and we were ready for sleep. The next morning we were up early and, between finishing off the packing, we watched from the balcony again. We said goodbye to our magnolia warbler, Kiskadee, and a Couch's kingbird. A Central American agouti foraged in the scrub just below the balcony. Despite the noise from the construction work, and the 4 flights of concrete steps with no handrail, our room had been ideal and the birding from the balcony very good. Now all we had to do was haul our cases back down the stairs and get over to the lobby for our 8:30 a.m. pickup. We didn't want to miss any birding time, so we took our breakfast standing outside the lobby and watching the trees. It was good that we did. A couple of collared aracari, new for the trip, bounced into the tree tops. On the way over we'd almost fallen over a small group of plain chachalaca who were taking advantage of the hotel sprinklers for a drink and a wash. So our trip was almost over. A yellow-bellied sapsucker seen from the minibus taking us and our fellow Nova Scotians back to the airport was almost the last triptych. But wasn't. That was reserved for a peregrine seen flying across the airport whilst waiting for our plane. Well, one of us saw it, the other had chosen that moment for a natural break. A trip list of 190 birds in 7 days, for lifers, and a good number of Mexicoticks. Even though January is rather a birding quiet time, it wasn't at all bad.